So you're looking to step up your parenting game, right? Especially with all the curveballs life throws our way these days. We thought diving into no sitting on the sideline dad might offer some new perspectives for you.
It's not your typical parenting advice podcast, that's for sure.
Not even close.
What struck me was their focus on fathers, We don't always hear that side of the parenting conversation.
It's true. Dads definitely face unique pressures and expectations these days. And this podcast tackles it all head on. They don't shy away from the tough stuff. We're talking screen time battles, the pressure to be the perfect parent.
And they don't just scratch the surface. They've got episodes on handling uncertainty, even prepping for emergencies, which, now that I think about it, might really resonate with you given your interest in mention the listener's specific interest related to parenting or societal challenges, if any.
It's a goldmine of practical advice, all grounded in real stories. And they don't just talk to, parenting gurus.
Oh no, they branch out way more than that.
They've had psychologists, entrepreneurs, even a psychic medium on the show.
It's that eclectic mix of voices that makes it so refreshing. They're not pushing a one-size-fits-all approach.
Exactly. Now, knowing you're interested in mention the listener's specific interest related to parenting or societal challenges, if any, the episode on the screen dilemma really jumped out at us.
It's so relevant, right? It feels like every parent is wrestling with screen time these days.
It's the ultimate parenting battleground. And that episode had a fascinating guest, an expert in tech addiction, who actually runs a digital detox summer camp. Can you imagine?
The insights he must have.
Seriously. And what I found interesting was he wasn't all about demonizing technology. It's easy to get caught up in screens are evil, but he emphasized teaching healthy digital habits instead.
It's like instead of just banning screens outright, which, let's face it, is nearly impossible these days.
Right. It's about giving kids the tools and skills to navigate the digital world responsibly.
Exactly. And that actually ties into another episode that might resonate with you, Green Shadows. With your interest in mention the listener's specific interest related to parenting or societal challenges, if any, this one really stood out.
Oh, that's the one about marijuana, right?
Yes. And with the legal landscape changing so rapidly, it's a topic a lot of parents are grappling with.
Totally uncharted territory for many.
Absolutely. And the episode doesn't shy away from the tough questions. It explores the potential impacts, especially on young minds.
It's about giving parents the information they need to have open, honest conversations, which, come to think of it, is a big theme throughout this entire podcast. Empowering parents with knowledge.
Definitely. And on that note, let's talk about mental wellness for a bit, because one episode that really got me and I think will resonate with a lot of our listeners is the imposter parent.
Oh man, that feeling of never being good enough as a parent. So relatable.
It's universal, isn't it? That constant self-doubt.
Like you're just winging it and hoping for the best.
Exactly. And they had this clinical psychologist on, Dr. Sarah Michaud, who specializes in addiction and codependency. And
oh wow, that's a powerful combination.
Right. And what was so impactful was her willingness to be vulnerable, to share her personal journey of overcoming addiction.
It makes you realize you're not alone in these struggles.
Exactly. And they don't just stop at you're not alone. They dig into the psychology behind imposter syndrome.
Why do we feel this way?
Yes. And crucially, they offer practical strategies for managing those feelings and developing a healthier self-image.
It's about rewiring those negative thought patterns.
Precisely. Celebrating your wins, no matter how small they may seem. And speaking of practical strategies, I know you mentioned that article you read about feeling unprepared for, mention a relevant current event or anxiety.
Oh yeah, that's been on my mind a lot lately.
Well, they had this episode on mastering home front survival skills that I think you'd find really interesting.
Really? What kind of skills are we talking about?
It's not about becoming a doomsday prepper or anything.
Okay, good, because that's not really my style.
Right, me neither. But they talked about things like gardening, food preservation, even community building.
Those are great life skills, though.
Exactly. And they framed them as empowering and practical, not fear-based.
I like that. Empowering, not fear-mongering.
Exactly. Their guest was Marjorie Wildcraft, who founded a whole preparedness network, and she really connected these skills to something deeper.
Oh, how so?
It's about cultivating self-reliance and agency, not just physical survival.
That's fascinating. I never thought about it that way.
It's less about what if the world ends and more about how can I be more resilient in my everyday life.
That's a really empowering way to look at it. I like that a lot.
Yeah, reclaiming that sense of control in a world that can feel Honestly, pretty unpredictable sometimes.
It's so true. And it fits in perfectly with that theme of self-improvement we were talking about earlier.
Oh, absolutely. And you mentioned how the podcast really hones in on that dad perspective.
Yeah, it's a perspective we don't hear enough from, I think.
Well, they have this really insightful episode, Dad Guilt, that dives deep into that.
Oh, man. Dad guilt. That's a whole thing, isn't it?
It really is, because on top of everything else, society puts so much pressure on fathers to be these, like, superhuman providers and protectors.
And now they're supposed to be Pinterest perfect parents on top of it all.
Exactly. It's a lot to live up to. But that episode, it really tackles those pressures head on.
It's like giving dads permission to actually talk about those feelings.
Yes, and to realize, hey, it's okay to feel this way. You're not alone.
Did they talk about the financial side of things at all? Because let's be real, raising a family is expensive.
They absolutely did. In fact, they brought in a financial expert who shared some really practical advice on budgeting and saving.
Oh, nice. So it's not just about the emotional aspect of dad guilt, but also giving dads some tangible tools to manage those pressures.
That's exactly it. And what I thought was really interesting was they also talked about the importance of teaching kids about finances from a young age.
Oh, that's so important. It's like that saying, give a man a fish.
And you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, and you feed him for a lifetime.
Exactly. But in this case, it's about equipping families with financial literacy.
I love that. Financial literacy, it's so crucial. And, that emphasis on empowering through knowledge, it extends to another really important topic they covered, self-care for dads.
Ooh, that's a good one. It's easy to let self-care fall by the wayside when you're in the thick of parenting.
It really is. You're so busy taking care of everyone else, you forget about yourself.
You really do. But they make a really good point in that episode. It's with Dr. Gary Sprouse, author of Highway to Happy Place.
Oh, I've heard of him.
He says self-care isn't selfish, it's essential.
And it really is. It's like that airplane oxygen mask analogy, right?
Yeah.
You have to put yours on first before you can help anyone else.
Such a good analogy. So what kind of self-care tips did they talk about?
Dr. Sprout shared some really practical strategies for fitting self-care into even the busiest schedules. He emphasized the importance of both mental and physical well-being.
That makes sense, right? If you're feeling run down and depleted, you're not going to be the best parent you can be.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that taking care of yourself is ultimately taking care of your family.
And I imagine that ties into that feeling of dad guilt we were talking about earlier. Like, if you're feeling more balanced and grounded as an individual, you're less likely to get caught up in those negative thought patterns.
100%. And that's something I really appreciate about this podcast overall. It creates this space for dads to feel seen and heard and understood in their unique experiences.
It's that sense of community, right?
Yeah.
Knowing you're not alone on this crazy journey of parenthood.
Exactly. It normalizes the struggles, celebrates the wins, and just reminds dads that they're in good company. Now, while we've been focusing on the dad perspective here, and this podcast is obviously geared towards fathers.
It's important to acknowledge that not all dads are the same.
Exactly. Fatherhood isn't one size fits all.
Not even close.
Yeah.
Every family is different. Every dad has his own unique journey.
Absolutely. You've got single fathers, stay-at-home dads, dads from all walks of life, and they're all navigating parenthood in their own way.
And let's not forget about the important role partners and other caregivers play too.
So true. It takes a village, as they say.
It really does. And while this podcast we've been diving into focuses specifically on dads, I actually think a lot of the advice applies to, well, anyone.
I completely agree. You don't have to be a dad to learn something valuable from, no, sitting on the sideline, Dad.
It's really about showing up as the best version of yourself for your kids, no matter who you are.
100%. So, as we wrap up our deep dive here,
It's clear this podcast isn't just about giving you a list of parenting hacks.
it's much deeper than that. It's about embracing the challenges and the rewards of fatherhood in all its messy, complicated glory.
And realizing you don't have to have it all figured out to be a great dad.
Absolutely. It's about learning, growing, and supporting each other along the way.
Beautifully said. So as you go about your week, we encourage you to think about which of these topics really resonated with you.
Was it the importance of setting healthy boundaries with technology? Or maybe the power of self-care?
Or maybe it was something else entirely. Whatever stuck with you, we challenge you to take that one small step.
What's one thing, no matter how small, that you can put into practice this week? Something inspired by no sitting on the sideline, Dad, that will help you feel even a little bit more confident and prepared on your own unique parenting journey.
We'll leave you with that thought. Until next time.